Okay, good morning and welcome. We have Dr. Susan Dean with us. What a pleasure. Welcome, Susan.
Good morning. Wonderful to be here with you this morning, Lori.
Yes, thank you so much. For everybody listening, Susan has become a dear friend and a trusted ally in the world of females who have climbed corporate ladders. And so it is a pleasure to be with her this morning. And she is going to tell us a little bit of her story and how she has climbed the ranks, risen to where she is today, running a team and a business here in the Hudson Valley of New York. I get the pleasure to see her on a regular basis at networking events. And in fact, this winter, I had the bright idea that I wanted to do something fun
Oh,
and creative and take a watercolor painting class. And it was right near where Susan lived. And so Susan was so kind as to indulge me. And she joined me every Sunday for a month. And we did water painting color together. So thrilled to have Susan here with me this morning.
yes. And
Okay.
I'm going to jump in on you, Lori, on the watercolor. I knew I had a problem when they put my watercolor painting up and they said, "What do you think?" So I don't think I was successful in that.
And we don't have to be, the A+ students at everything. We can just do something just to get a creative outlet,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. I think that one I need more training on.
Yeah, me too. I was not A+ there either. I was definitely in the D range. So more work needed to manipulate those watercolors across the canvas. So Susan and I met through a mutual female leader here in the Hudson Valley. I had started the Hudson Valley Women's Networking Group, and it's been a pleasure ever since. So, Susan, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, your corporate journey and how you got here?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, just quickly, a little bit about my upbringing. So, we were raised in a military family. So, if you think of, sort of the military guideline of, strict rules follower, that type of thing. And then that would be my father. And then with a mother who was on the HR side. So, it was a wonderful, just wonderful combination and training, if you will, in terms of, the upbringing, a wonderful balance. But through work, I am someone who's always worked. So whether it was babysitting when I was in high school, I volunteered when I was younger, but I've always been actively participating, not only in the workforce, but then, just throughout life, focusing on different activities. We were brought up, and this is actually important because it helps to understand who I am, but we were brought up through a life of service. So to always look to others, always help others. And as I continued on my career path, I never have turned down an opportunity. If I was at a company and I was offered to work at a different job, I just embraced it and learned something. So I might not have been growing vertically, but I would grow horizontally and learn about the different functions. So fast forward to the role I'm in today, it helps you to see the vision of making a decision and then understanding what the downstream effects are. In terms of my career, I did start, out of college working in distribution. My undergraduate degree is in finance. I started in general ledger accounting. Very quickly realized that, that might not be the job for me. I enjoy the interaction with people, sitting, and, that required me to be in an office a lot. So sitting, there, I thought, okay. But then I was offered an opportunity to move into inventory, at this corporation. So I did that. At one point in my career, I worked in the waste field. So think about, environmental services. So I learned that. I learned a sales perspective. I learned sales operations. I learned inventory. I learned marketing. I was the assistant to an executive vice president at one point. I learned about a credit facility. I had the opportunity to actually read the documents. But as I mentioned, I just embraced each of those steps. So every part that I could learn, and I built on that. When I got to a point in my career where I needed more time and chose more time to spend at home raising a child, I expanded my career, from the educational perspective. So always looking to see, what is it that other companies, what skill set, are people looking for, and continued that way. But never turned down any kind of role. Been in distribution for the majority of my career. I would say distribution supply chain. At one point, we had an import manager who left unexpectedly, and they said, here, figure this out. I'm a problem solver by nature. Went in, figured out how to import, and, just went on from there.
What I hear is just this willingness to say yes
Mm-hmm.
and not get caught in the, oh, I don't know. Oh, I'm not sure if I've had that experience, but a willingness to jump in, roll your sleeves up, and figure it out.
Yes, and embrace the challenge. So the challenge is something that drives me. And in my current role, we're juggling, 1,000 things all at once, and none can drop. And so it's really that challenge, the challenge of learning something new, is a conquest for me, in work, and it keeps me very motivated.
Yes, yes. And you strike me as somebody who loves that multifaceted busyness all the
Yes.
time. Yes. Like
Yes. It's interesting.
how many
Hmm.
plates can I spin at once?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that is true.
Yes. Now, what happens when one of the plates does drop?
Well, we work very hard so that they don't. But, in our current work environment, and it's interesting, we have discussions about it. And oftentimes I'll say to our team, we're not talking about people, we're talking about the thing that happened. So if you envision, for example, you can hold up your phone. We'll take the phone, put it in the middle of the table, and say, okay, everyone, this thing happened. It's the phone in the middle of the room. Now let's have an open conversation about it. How do we stop it from happening again? How do we improve, with our eye on the goal of being the best that we can be personally and, professionally?
Yeah. What a great approach, because that then depersonalizes it, right? So
Yes.
people aren't so defensive and saying like they need to defend what happened or
Yes. And it's a great tool for growth. We're seeing a lot in our up and coming generations, the idea of not wanting to make a mistake, not wanting to be the person that was perhaps involved in, something, one of those plates dropping. So it is through this continuous training and opening the conversation, because you need the conversation, you need the communication for true growth, in the workforce. Communication is one of the soft skills that is in need in our up and coming generations, because when we think of like technology, we think of a generation that's grown up with computers. That's we hear stories of, we're sitting at the dinner table texting. So it's really about developing those skills in our workers. And this is one of the ways that we do it. We do that, that is in a non-defensive mode. It's more of a trust group. We need to focus on the phone, the thing in the middle of the table that happened, not the individuals.
right. And that we're not going to live in this perfect world. We're not going to live in a world where
Right.
every single person gets a trophy. You know, in
Right.
in real life, things do happen, and we do need to make sure that we develop a wherewithal in our own inner beings that we can take that feedback and make corrections and improve and
Yes.
grow.
Yes. And that's a good point, because if we look at social media, I mean, we see images of perfection all of the time. That's what individuals are surrounded by. And it's, oh my gosh, maybe I'm not perfect. And it's the realization that we all aren't perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. And how do you deal with that? How do you internally manage that and come out and say, yes, I'm still okay. I made a mistake. I owned it. And then how do we as a team move forward?
Yes.
from, whatever, may have occurred.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know I've had my own experiences throughout my career where I've made mistakes and I've had to own them and, come out the other side better. Just last week, it wasn't even a mistake, but there was a mishap and I had to go to plan B. I was doing a presentation to 600 people and the technology just didn't work. And so I thought it was going to go one way and I would be on this virtual call and everybody would see me. It was an audio call. And that wasn't how I planned, but we have to be able to go to some plan Bs and be adaptable. And I
Yes.
think that being able to, like you said, communicate, train our younger associates coming up that, hey, that is okay. That is okay. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be Snapchat perfect with a filter in order to
Right.
be
Right.
okay. Yeah.
For it to be okay, and we're right, and we're not all perfect.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I'm an operations person, so in operations, we anticipate things may not go as planned. So we pre-plan, we plan, we think of every type of incident. But then you're describing something. Then what happens when it doesn't go right, and then you are probably sitting there getting ready to go, or present, and then you have this weight of the world on you of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? But it's also being able to think clearly, that's a skill, through this stressful situation. And
Mhm.
then how do you get out of that? How do you manage through the stress? And, that's applicable in these kind of situations, but in work in general, right? Because we are in really stressful situations from time to time, and we have to be able to think our way through those. So it brings us to some of like critical thinking skills and helping individuals to, I'm not going to say train necessarily, but bring them through exercises that help them to develop that.
Yeah.
Because it is also another area that we're seeing in our up and coming generations that is in need, is the ability to think through. So
Yeah.
you described a perfect situation. I had a problem, I had an opportunity. This is the way I thought it would go, but it didn't. But I had a backup plan. And by the way, the backup plan worked because I see nothing but positive feedback. So I know that your event was successful, whatever you were doing.
It was. Yes. Thank you.
Um, yeah. So,
Yes.
I mean, that's wonderful. And it's great, from the thinking part or the critical thinking, as you roll through.
Yeah. And then knowing that we can rise to the occasion, right? I
Yes.
think that's also a
Yeah.
critical skill to teach our young people that
Mm-hmm.
even though the events aren't as you planned them to be, you can still rise to the occasion
Mm-hmm.
and feel good
Yes.
about yourself after the fact.
Yes. Right. Well, it's interesting. I had this opportunity to go through leadership training with Dr. Tony Burgess, just phenomenal. Actually, up
Wow.
here in the Hudson Valley.
Wow.
And he is awesome at leadership. But in our training, he posed this question. He said, who are you as a leader? And so when someone asks you that, typically we'll start to say, well, I want to be this. I'm thinking I want to be, and you can name whatever qualities. And he stopped everyone. He said, no, I'm not asking you who you want to be, but who are you as a leader and why are you that person? And, it's interesting. So he took us through this exercise of, you know, taking a moment to write down, it can be 5, 10 things, but the significant traumas or things that have happened in your life, experiences where, they basically shaped you or you stopped. And so your comment made me think of this, Lori, because you said, your ability to pick yourself back up. So if we can visualize standing on the top of a cliff and we're standing there and then one of these traumas occurs, and let's say there's water at the bottom of the cliff, we end up in the water and then we have to rebuild, climb back up on our cliff, which is pulling yourself together, realizing you can get through whatever situation it is, only to have, maybe something happen again and you're back in the water. So what he trained on, which I thought was significant, is how do you manage? What is it that you do so you don't fall into the water? Maybe you hit a ledge on the cliff, pull yourself up, and then you're back, ready to go again. So, and I've used that so effectively. It was eye-opening for me. When oftentimes if I speak locally, I'll talk about, the traumas in my life. And it's actually the reason I am the leader that I am today, which will be things like, I have high integrity, I'm empathetic, I believe in communicating, and I'll tell you why. I mean, a little bit of personal history about me is that I had a significant car accident when I was just out of college where my seatbelt saved my life. Had an airbag didn't deploy. So I got through that, but then, soon followed by the death of my oldest brother, and he was 28. So that was followed by, these multiple, other instances in my life, just year after year after year. And I will tell you that in my family, basically my whole family has died except for one brother. And when you talk about, trauma, losing a mother who was 55 unexpectedly in surgery, I myself had a cancer diagnosis that I got through. And then when I was on the train going back into the city, the train I was in, the car I was riding in, derailed going 70 miles an hour. And the way this accident occurred, our lives were saved. But, when I think about that, and I think about these traumas, and then what I described as you're standing at the top of the cliff, now you're in the water, now you have to pick yourself up, now you're back in the water again. It was really a great learning for me because, my life has been full of a lot of these traumas. And I have learned now to take a few days, I take the weekend. I can feel sorry for myself if I want to, for the weekend. And then Monday comes, it's over, let's roll again. So it's just interesting, but it's something that, it's a skill that I think is really important for people to master to help them to get through. And again, it's helped to shape me because my outside life is very traumatic. So I've somewhat thrown myself into work as the escape, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And what a powerful visual for so many of us, right? Who could fall off that cliff, end up in the water, and just swim around in there for a while. As though, that's the, self-pity, that's the, I deserve to be down here. Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I deserve to have fallen off the cliff. And I'm just going to hang out here for a minute. And then that long climb back up, only to slip and keep falling. And when you were describing that visual, I could just so relate. And so to learn these tools that help us, maybe we just slip down to the lower ledge. Maybe we bring some rope with us and we catch onto a tree or something as we grow. But then what I really heard you say was you give yourself permission to have some space and time when emotionally you need it. And that's something I don't know as women that we do a great job of. At least these high performing women that I seem to run in circles with, we're just going to push through, hustle, grind, go. And before you know it, we're in fetal position on the bathroom floor or down in the water. Right.
Right. And, so I have to say, you've influenced me this way, Lori, because I watch you online and, you and I mean, you're a wonderful friend, but also you'll say to me, okay, you need to stop. And, we were just, casually speaking earlier and, it was that, conversation about saying, all right, here's my schedule. I don't have to be all things to everyone all the time. You can say, stop. I need this space, and it's important to take a break. And maybe that one thing you were thinking of, you couldn't miss an external function or whatever. You have to say stop. And, going through these experiences, it's the same thing. It's giving yourself permission to feel that situation, to process that situation, and regroup, take a nap if that's, what works for you. Get up then and move forward.
Yeah.
That is a very good point. We don't, as women, give ourselves that, grace to just stop a moment.
Yeah. And this idea that we need to be all things to all people. And meanwhile, the cup is empty. There's nothing left to give. So,
Right. And then
yeah.
how effective are you when you have nothing to give? And in a role that I have, with over 200 employees that are depending on you day in and day out, if your cup is empty, how are you able to give? And the leader of a site sets the tone for the site. And, if I'm coming in not able to give anything, and you have, these hundreds of people who are depending on you to keep the ship moving forward, you've got nothing. You can't be your best self. I give so much credit to Dr. Tony Burgess. There's one other point that he made. He said, what are the 3 things that you need every day to be your best self at work? And, for me, I need sleep, I need to exercise, and I need to eat right. And, are you focused on your 3 things, And so, again, just to sort of segue into this leadership piece, you need those. And so it's my responsibility to make sure I have those, so that I can be here and be present, for the team that's depending, on me to be here and support them, in this role.
Yeah. Yeah. And how quickly we can forego some sleep, skip the workout,
Right.
grab some garbage lunch on the go because we're so busy, right? Be so
Yes.
quick to kind of sell ourselves short for the sake of time and convenience. Yeah.
And we think we're helping by doing that. But if you're not showing up at 100% or your best self, you're really hurting yourself, long term. And, you could be limiting yourself and not realizing it. And then in your role, and I know you've spoken about this, as well, Lori, about, being effective in your role and, making sure that you do stop.
Yeah. 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 And sometimes that's really, really hard. That is so counterintuitive.
Very hard.
Yes. Yes. I call that contrary action, like do the opposite of what my mind is telling me to do and take that pause, take that stuff. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, and also, because we think, sometimes, and this could be, I don't know if this is a female thing or just in general, but as a worker, sometimes we think that is what is needed in order to advance, that you have to just go crazy and, do everything. And it's really not, right? So it's the other part.
Say more about that, Susan. What are the other parts that actually help you to advance?
Well, for me, my focus, a couple of things. My focus has always been not on climbing through the rank. It's been focused on doing a good job. So for whatever job that I take on, I want to make sure that, again, we talked about being present. I need to do, in order to do that, the things that I need to show up. But ensuring that I'm doing my part, I'm holding myself accountable, and, have I learned, the appropriate parts of the role. But also, this other key point is really engaging the workforce and engaging those around you. That is a critical piece that's often overlooked. When you think back into, types of managers, we see often images of carrying a big stick. I'm the manager, I said, therefore you do. Versus this thought that you have a team, they really want to do well, and they need your help to train. We're all on the rope together. We're pulling, whether it's tug of war or any, visual like that. We're really here to do a good job. We need you to lead us there. But in order to lead, you really just need to understand the situation, and who better than the workers themselves to give them that credit to, ask them to find out from them, whether it's through groups, whether it's one-on-one conversation, what's happening in their lives. And then engagement pieces is truly often overlooked. So that is part of my focus here, in terms of leadership and my own leadership style.
Yes, I agree. We never found the answers sitting in our ivory tower. The answers were
No.
always on the floor, in the field, in the stores. That's where the unlock lives.
Yes, yes. And it's at every level of the business. It's
Yes.
from the person who's sweeping the floor, all the way up. And my belief is that every person has value. So there's something to be learned from every person at every point of your interaction. And even if the thing that you learn is you don't want to be like them, you've still learned something. And if we approach our jobs and we approach, business, even life that way, to look for the positive, look for the lesson, look for the learning, it creates such a different perspective. But you're also learning all the time, and you're learning locally, you're learning, a lot. And let's say there is something that you wanted to change, even just learning a new perspective. For the first time, we have 4 generations in our workforce. And, there is a lot of learning. And I will say that from even my perspective, I'm still learning. I'm learning, the management style for each of these generations is so different. So it's even just helping, our team to understand those differences in what's expected. And how each individual, what the individuals within those groups may be thinking.
Is there anything that you do particularly that helps with your curiosity for each of those 4 generations to help you be effective?
There's a lot of observing, and it's open-mindedness. So I'm fortunate to have a wonderful number 2 that's responsible here for operations. And he has actually taught me a lot. Now, I will be perfectly candid and transparent and say in the beginning, I was like, why in my mind, why are you saying thank you so much? Because when I came up through, management and through work, if you didn't hear anything bad, you were doing a good job, So I'm like, great. No one's hearing anything bad. We're good. But just this style of, he's saying thank you, and I'm thinking, okay, but I'm watching and I'm observing, and some of what he's doing is being effective. So I'm letting him do that leading while I'm watching, I'm observing, and then, initiating, just incorporating some of that, into my leadership. But it is different. It's a very different style, but it can be effective. But who would have thought, right? So we go from if you don't hear anything bad, you're doing your job well. So basically silence.
Yeah.
And now it's thank you, thank you, thank you. And then, your thought could be, okay, you're here to do a job. Why do I have to say thank you? Or why should we say thank you? I mean, I say thank you a lot, but my point is over thank yous.
Yes.
Yes. But the extra thank yous work, and it's expected, and it's what motivates the team. So it's learning that style. I don't know. Does that make sense?
That does make perfect sense. In fact, I've read some articles, it's not necessarily compensation that people want. It's being understood. It's being recognized. Yes. It's that validation. And we can do that. That isn't expensive. That doesn't take a lot for us to see what people bring for value and to verbalize it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I found too with some of our team, the number one thing that they love, I should say, is if they're recognized in front of their peers and we say thank you. This is for all of the team. Before I was talking a little bit about some of our management level, but yes, and to your point, it's free. Thank you is free, and it makes them feel so good. It's like they want to throw their shoulders back and say, yes, I did that. And, so it is truly awesome. And they've made some really wonderful contributions, to our team here, the workforce. So It's been
Yes.
great.
And we know the benefit of engagement to productivity to profitability. So if we can say thank you and that works, let's say thank you.
Right. Well, and it's interesting. So through some of my research, as you know, I'm focused on soft skills. And in the literature is that a happy worker is a productive worker.
Yeah.
So, safety, everything that's been studied says that, this engagement, is very important. And I'm saying engagement because in my view, that's where you get happiness. I mean, we're at work oftentimes longer than we're with our own families. So while we're there, we should enjoy it. And we don't have to like each other, but we do have to get along. I mean, those are just some base rules, or guidelines for the workforce. But, how awesome is it to have this view of, I actually can't wait to go to work. Here are people that I enjoy working with. We all get along. We're family, if you will. What a better place to work than somewhere where you're dreading having to get up to go there. I don't want to work there. So,
No.
I want to work at this. Yeah. I mean, and we talk about the joy, which I just, I have to tell you, I do love, I keep talking about you, but I do love all of your messages. We do need joy in our lives, and engagement is one of the ways to seek that and to get it.
Yes. Yes. I've just been doing some research. We spend 1/3 of our life at work and another third of our life sleeping. So that only leaves 1/3 for the rest of it. So
Right.
we really need to find a place to work that, gives us that purpose and that connection that fulfills us. So the more we can do to create that space for ourselves and for others, the better.
Oh, sure, sure.
So you've done your PhD in this area. You want to talk a little bit about that?
So I have a doctorate in business administration, or DBA degree, and the focus was on leadership. But my area of study is soft skills. So I have a published article, The Soft Skills Needed for the 21st Century Workforce. Now, we're in 2025. That was published in 2017. But I will share with you that my path to get there was not in sight, but it was through a life-changing experience I had prior to my current employment. I worked for a third-party logistics provider and in New Jersey, and our customer, and I think they would be okay with me saying, our customer was Walmart at the time. And it was a warehouse where we had workers who some of them were formerly incarcerated, and they had come through the federal system. So I had this awesome opportunity to work from them. They came from some very, very tough areas like inner city, Newark, Trenton, Camden, New Jersey. And what I found was through this experience is that the skills they needed to survive in the communities were the opposite of what we wanted at work. So while we were at work, we wanted, everyone to be friendly, to have teamwork, to communicate. One of them shared with me one time, they said, well, at night when we hear gunshots, we have the kids go in the basement. And I said, what are you talking about? Like what gunshots? Like that was not anything that I understood. But to survive there, and they shared with me, to survive there, you didn't go up and make friends with everyone. It was just the opposite. I mean, it was kind of crazy.
Keep to yourself. Be safe. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So these workers, so I was able to build a team there, and it was a wonderful experience. And I also had the opportunity to see the world through their eyes. And when I did, it was a very different place, and it changed my vision. And I'm very passionate about it. You're going to hear that in my voice.
Yes.
It changed my life. And that is when I went back to school and I said, all right, if I can, create this team here, and and it was a solid team. They were awesome. How do you bring it to, the larger group? And how do you bring it to a larger group? And that is the reason I went back to school to, study more, with regard to soft skills so that I could then impact a larger audience. Now, that warehouse was a temporary warehouse, so it was open for about 3 years. And then the work moved down to the southern states. So it closed. And otherwise, I would most likely still be there because I loved it. And I loved the opportunity to impact, and positively influence individual lives. Now, I will share with you that, the team, so part of that is, with this team, we worked with them to, help them, like, to create their resume. And we said, all right, when you go to apply for a job, people are going to look at your resume. And if they run your background check, that might be an impediment, to you for getting a job. I said, all right, so we need to, make sure we're out in the community and we're volunteering. And they did, so we had at one of the local school districts, there was an opportunity to participate in a walk and raise money. And they came up with this idea to sell these, lollipops, chocolate lollipops to some, the truck drivers when they were coming in, for $1 and donate the money to, this cancer cause. And I said, all right, well, that's great, but you actually have to be in the walk. You can't just, do this part. You have to do part 2. So I went, they came, we walked. And what was so awesome is that their resumes then, we could update and reframe that picture to say, okay, yes, these individuals did go through, a challenging opportunity in their life where they may or may not have made the right decision. I'm not the person to judge that, but they did serve this time. But look what else they've done. And we reframed them, and they were, to my knowledge, all of them were able to get another job. It wasn't uncommon for them to, like, for me to be driving down the street. I remember one time, one of the workers said, I see this person honking, and he's like, look, I got this job. And he's so excited and was so proud of them. So, it was just wonderful. One of them, we encouraged them, to get their GED, because all of these points, if you could get paid more to get experience driving a forklift, we encouraged them to drive a forklift. And after the warehouse closed, I got this call one morning, and there was one worker who I kept, saying, listen, you really need to get your GED. That's, typically that could be a qualifier for another job, to at least have your GED or finish high school. Push back. I said, okay, it's up to you. I can't push you through this. You need to make this decision. So I was out of the warehouse maybe 6 months or so. My phone rings, and this other person on the end of the phone, who was the worker, he said, I did it. Probably Miss D, I did it. And I said, okay, first of all, who is this and what did you do? Yeah. And he said, I did it. I got my GED. And he was so proud. But, so that just really, made me feel good that he did it. And he also felt good because he did complete, he stepped up. He did what it took. We just helped to guide him there. But that's how I got into the soft skills arena. And that is, as I mentioned, a life-changing experience. My doctorate, which is published online, you can see it. It is dedicated to those workers. And that's what it says. They helped me to see the world through their eyes. So it was really awesome experience for me.
What a transformation. I mean, for everybody involved, and how when we change us, we literally can change the world, and we can start one group at a time, and that ripple effect.
Yes. And, fast forward, so to the role that I'm in now, my view of it really is a platform to help others. So if we can develop individuals, train them, help them to become the best that they can be, that's success. Emerson, to quote Emerson, and part of, one of his writings is to know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, that is to have succeeded. So one person at a time, in my vision, that's the goal, to help individuals, help them to develop. And I think if you were to come into our current work environment or even to speak, we've had lots of our workers who have moved up and moved on, and they would tell you that we encourage them. It seems sort of contrary to being a leader, because typically we want to hold on to the people who are doing their job really well. We don't do that. We try to elevate and lift, but they've got to do the work to get there. We'll give them the support, but they've got to do what it takes, to get to that next level.
I think that's so admirable because people deserve to be elevated and lifted, and we just need to give them, the support to help them fly. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. I wanted to show you something really funny. I was speaking with some of our team. We have a large group of workers where English is second language. So their, native language typically would be Spanish. And from my experience, they're very critical of themselves and their spoken word. And so I spoke with one and I said, what's stopping you? Because I can understand you. And this individual said, well, that's just because it's you. Nobody else can. And I said, well, that's not true. I don't have any special, listening ears. If I can understand you, you're fine. Like, be confident. So then I was doing a presentation the other day. So they got me on this one. And they said, all right, at the ends, I always put thank you, English and Spanish. And so I had put on the board, gracias. And they looked at me and they said, okay, you need to say that in Spanish. And I said to them, well, I don't pronounce it well. And they looked at me and they said, that's how we feel when we're talking English. I said, all right, you got me. So now I said, all right, I need to practice a little more, but I thought that was a very good point.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
You don't even think of, but they said, that's how we feel. And I go, what a great way to help people understand that.
Yes. To resonate, right? To bring it full circle. Yes. Help me walk in your shoes. Yes.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's just so simple, but I'm like, why didn't I, figure that out before? But
Yes.
So they were good.
Wow. Well, gosh almighty, some wonderful stories. We started before we hit the record button. One of the questions I love to ask is, what's kind of the worst job you've ever had? Maybe the dirtiest job you've ever had. And Susan, you have a really fun one that I would love for you to share.
Well, you could call it fun, Lori. I'm so sure that I would be calling it that. My visual truly is that Lucille Ball episode where the chocolates are going down the conveyor. However, replace chocolates with blueberries.
Oh, my gosh.
Very early on, I had a great friend who said, all right, let's go get this job, sorting blueberries. I said, okay. So I want you to think of the heat of the summer. You're in a small building, maybe a little shack with no doors or anything. The only thing in there is the conveyor, the blueberries, of course, but this piece of conveyor, and then, the containers at the end. And the job was, as soon as, let's say, the whistle blows, you stood there the whole time picking off the bad blueberries, like constantly in motion. Our hands were stained at the end of the night, with, this is going to be funny though. So my friend was like, all right, we have to bleach our hands. I mean, this is the kinds of things we thought about. I was relaying that story to someone. They said, why didn't you wear gloves? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe we were too young. We didn't.
Maybe they didn't have gloves back then. I don't know.
We don't know. Horrible. 500 degrees, nonstop for 8 hours, picking off the bad blueberries. And no music, nothing. No, listen,
A whole
I have a lot of
summer
respect
spent that way.
Well, no, I was rescued. I had been volunteering at a local hospital, and about a week or so into that, and I still say that was like the most challenging role that I had. But a week or so in, they called me and they said, oh, we have this part-time summer job. air-conditioned office, whatever. I said, all right, I'm in. When do I
Yes,
start?
please. Yes, please.
Oh my gosh, it was horrible.
I bet it was. Now, as a girl who grew up in Maine, I know what
Yeah.
it's like for wild blueberries to grow. And so when Susan started telling me this story, all I could picture were these blueberry rakes that we had where you held the blueberry rake and you would go and you would like scoop them off the bushes. So, but Susan had an entirely different experience, much like Lucille Ball and the chocolate.
Yeah.
So we were
Yes.
chuckling before we hit record about Susan's escapade with blueberries and stained
And
hands.
those Lucille Ball chocolates were big. These are like little
Oh
tiny. And then
gosh.
we'd
And run
have
away.
someone.
And
Yeah.
like run away. Like you couldn't grab
I
them all up.
The whole, having like blued hands at the end of the day, that wasn't popular. So I think it
No.
was the heat of it. And, the heat outside was just it was really hot. And then, yeah, having that on your hands was rough.
And
But
I'm sure it's not like you could stop and take a drink of water because the
nope.
blueberries are like
Oh, no.
flying by. And yeah.
Yeah, you had two 15-minute breaks and like a half-hour lunch break. And any other time your hands were moving on the conveyor. And I remember even, one of the individuals there kind of saying, okay, you need to speed this up. And I'm like, okay, we were standing there, it was moving fast, like Lucille Ball's, chocolates, but, blueberries are a little tiny.
They're tiny. They'll run away from
Yeah.
you.
So, yes. So, I would say, yeah, I'm probably not the best. That and watercolor, as you mentioned.
And we paid for watercolor.
I know. That's one of my traumatic experiences is the watercolor because, as you mentioned, Laura, you actually were good at it. And then he would put yours up and say, oh, I love the browns. I love these colors. And then that one day when he puts mine up and he looks over and he goes, so what do you think? And I'm like, oh, okay. I get it. Not good. But what you did say is that, he told us that if you had better paper, that helped and all that. So I got all the things I could get to help me and, to make
paper.
this great. Isn't that funny? That was funny, but that was a great experience. And, I will say, going to like doing things that you don't normally do. I wouldn't have normally done it. I said, hey, this will be fun.
Yeah.
And having, being open about it. Yeah. So that was a good
fun.
time. It was
fun.
wonderful.
Oh, all right. I have a few rapid fire questions for you. Okay. One piece of leadership advice you wish you'd learned earlier.
Whoa, you're gonna stump me on this. That I wish I learned earlier.
In your career.
Yeah. When things get tough, keep your head down and keep moving.
Excellent. A daily habit or practice that keeps you grounded.
Exercise.
Love it.
In the morning, getting up, a routine, exercising.
Wonderful. The most joyful moment in your career so far. I think we might have heard it, but.
Yeah, well, that experience.
Yes.
Very joyful, life-changing.
Oh,
working with that team.
Amazing. What's one thing people often misunderstand about success?
It isn't about, being the decision maker. It's about making the right decisions. And the right decisions come from experience.
Oh, so good.
You don't want to be in this role if you don't know how to make the right decisions, where to look, that type of thing.
Yeah. 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 If you are so eager just to get to the position and the title, it might not work out. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. What do you want your leadership legacy to be in one sentence?
That I made a difference.
Yeah. That quote. Yeah. And Susan, I believe you have very much made a difference. Yes, my friend. Such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Thank you, Susan, for joining us today. We are so blessed to have had you.
Thank you, Lori. And, equally happy, to spend this time with you. I'm a follower. You're awesome on LinkedIn. Love your messages. They're very uplifting. And so thank you for that.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much. We will see you soon.